Tired of big tech clashing with your Catholic values? Fide Chat is now live on the Apple App Store and Google Play Store. It's private, encrypted, and built by Catholics for Catholics, with features like parental controls and more. Connect securely with family, friends, and groups. Download Fide Chat at fide.email. Technology without compromise. You might recall, in the Archdiocese of Detroit, I reported here, as have others, that 3 conservative, meaning they taught Catholicism. That's what it means to be conservative in the church now. But they were seminary professors at the seminary in Detroit, were purged from the seminary because they taught Catholicism. Now, that's not the excuse given. The excuse given by the diocese was that these teachers had the temerity to point to Pope Francis as teaching heterodoxy, meaning things that were something different than the Catholic faith. They would go after him, and not just in like dusty theological articles that almost nobody reads, but they would go after him on podcasts and on social media. That's a no-no. If you've ever wondered why more voices in the priesthood didn't speak out against Pope Francis, and they're probably not going to speak out about bad things going on under the new Pope, it's because of stories like that one, where 3, including Ralph Martins and Dr. Edwards, were canceled from there. We've got an update here, and the update we're seeing here is now the propaganda campaign to defend what Archbishop Weissenberger has done. Because Archbishop Weissenberger is no friend of orthodoxy, to put it mildly. Go to the National Catholic Reporter. Under this unfortunate headline, Archbishop Weissenberger confronts problem number 1 in Detroit, the seminary. Problem number 1 in Detroit is not the seminary. Problem number 1 in that diocese is the same as in almost every diocese in the Western world. Most Catholics who go to Mass on a regular basis don't believe what the Church teaches about the Eucharist. Full stop. Every study has shown that. To the point where even Bishop Robert Barron, that voice of moderation in the Church, is utterly flabbergasted whenever this topic comes up when he's giving a talk somewhere. This isn't just rad trads pointing this out. This is also conservatives and moderates pointing this out too. The number 1 problem in that diocese is not that you have seminary professors who corrected Pope Francis when he needed correcting, to warn people about what it was he was teaching. No, instead, it's a widespread problem of most Catholics not being Catholics because they reject basic Catholic teachings on basic theology. And if you don't accept those theological teachings, you aren't a Catholic. You're something else. Written by Michael Sean Winters, who's never missed an opportunity to defend some evil action by some prelate who should be managing a Walmart somewhere. From the article, quote, "The news that Archbishop Edward Weissenberger of Detroit terminated the employment of 3 professors at the Archdiocesan Sacred Heart Major Seminary is creating a lot of buzz in church circles. The removals are long overdue, and kudos to Weissenberger, who was installed as Archbishop on March 18th for doing it. The 3 men terminated are Ralph Martin, Eduardo Echeverria, and Edward Peters. All 3 had cast aspersions on Pope Francis, even questioning his orthodoxy. They did not restrict their criticism to scholarly articles in theological journals. They did so on blogs and in magazine interviews. Whether they intended it or not, and it is difficult to see how they did not intend it, their criticisms contributed to a hostility to Francis that is widespread in certain powerful sectors of the Catholic Church in the United States. Peter Fairhard's excellent 2019 story about Sacred Heart being a hotbed of anti-Francis sentiment revealed the extent and the obnoxiousness of that sentiment. I had previously tangled with Peters over the years. For example, when he criticized something I had written about threats to marriage. There's certainly room in academic circles for criticism of papal teaching, but the criticisms should always be rendered respectfully. I was in seminary when the Vatican took steps to remove Father Charles Curran. He was my professor for Moral Theology 101, and he certainly differed from the magisterium on several hot-button issues, but his critique was thoughtful and respectful. Curran was as persuasive when he presented magisterial teaching as he was when he explained his differences. He certainly never claimed that his teaching represented the authentic magisteriums and not the popes." End quote. All right, I want to tell you about Father Charles Curran. I have a book on Catholic social teaching on my bookshelf by Father Charles Curran. For if you don't know, I don't flex my PhD much, but I have one. I did my work in essentially political science, basically. And what I wrote my doctoral dissertation on was sustainable development as a policy area and how the Catholic Church had an answer to the secular approach to it. And so I wrote a doctoral dissertation on Catholic social teaching, basically. I had to make it much more moderate and pro Laudato Si than I wanted to, but my committee chairman was a college professor who basically told me that the church isn't against the modernist heresy anymore. And when he told me that, I talked to a couple of very conservative Novus Ordo priests who agreed that I should just give them the document they want and then work afterwards to against these errors. I still don't know how I feel about that advice, but I did take it. Now, one piece of advice I got was from a missionary priest from Argentina who was ordained by Cardinal Bergoglio, and this priest is extraordinarily conservative. I know it was the weirdest thing when I found out he was ordained by then Cardinal Bergoglio, but he told me when looking at my Catholic social teaching books that I was picking up at the early stages of my doctoral dissertation to avoid, like the plague, Father Charles Curran, because Father Charles Curran was a heretic. Full stop. Father Charles Curran never saw a social justice issue for the secular world that he didn't want to foist onto the Catholic Church and twist the teachings of the Church around. So Father Charles Curran getting canceled by Rome was a defense of the magisterial teachings of the faith, especially when it came to social questions. Invoking him here is funny because it sort of gives his bias away. It would be funny if it were not so dangerous that these conservative critics of Francis almost always accuse him of sowing confusion when it is their attempt to replace the authentic magisterium with their own theology that is the principal point of confusion. At Crisis Magazine, editor Eric Sammons asked, "So why would two distinguished theologians with no hint of scandal associated with them be unceremoniously fired from their positions without warning or even explanation? The scandal is that they were reforming priests, and priests must be loyal to their bishop, as the bishop must be loyal to the pope. That is how a Catholic ecclesiology works. The professors were avatars of dissent in a culture built on obedience." Besides, Salmon's own answer to his question is repugnant. Simply put, they, the fired professors, dared to criticize the regime, and for that they must be purged. He goes on to deliver harsh, unsubstantiated indictments of the character and leadership of Weissenberger, Chicago Cardinal Blaise Cupich, and of course Francis. Samus, too, has forgotten that the old joke about being more Catholic than the Pope is just that, a joke. And it goes on like that. That is essentially regime media going to full defense of the purge of Catholic teachers at a seminary by one of the new rising stars of badness, of terrible leadership in the church in America, and that would be Archbishop Weissenberger. He's not the only one. Steve Skojek posted a screenshot from an X account that I'm blocked by on his Substack. It's from Mike Lewis. If you're not familiar with Mike Lewis, he's the proprietor of Where Peter Is. Mike Lewis is is a voice that for some reason people who are on our side of things tend to make fun of, and I don't know why. Mike Lewis is actually one of the most dangerous minds that they have. I don't know why they don't use him more often. He is very, very effective at communication. He's a very intelligent person. You should take him seriously. Here's what he had to say. Many people have been asking why I described the recent fired seminary professors in Detroit as heterodox or said they dissent from the magisterium. This is the talking point that you're going to see in defense of this. In a nutshell, they have been teaching an erroneous definition of Catholic orthodoxy for years. In their vision, fidelity to the Catholic Church has more to do with holding to a list of doctrinal precepts deemed traditional and absolutely unchanging. rather than as being part of the people of God, in communion with and obedience to the church that Christ founded, led by the successors of the apostles, the bishops, with and under the successor of Peter, the Pope, who is the visible source of unity in the church and guarantor of fidelity to the Word of God. And that's a very effective statement. But he's missing one kind of thing. It's not supposed to be either or. And when it becomes either or, the saints, going back to the Arian heresy, tell us that if you have to choose, you cling to tradition until the situation gets sorted out. You cling to tradition, no matter who is introducing novelty in the church. Recorded the entirety of St. Vincent of Lerins' landmark work, the Commentary, for this channel in one chapter pieces, sometimes 2 chapter pieces when he was writing very short chapters. I recommend you listen to it. Or if you don't want to listen to me read, go buy a copy of it on Amazon. It's super cheap, and it's one of the most accessible writings of the Church Fathers you will ever go through. In it, he describes the situation he was dealing with, the heresy of Arius, and how most of the bishops of the church had gone along with it, and for whatever reason the Pope wasn't doing too good a job of standing up against it. And so what he did was lay the foundation for what gets called Recognize and Resist. And he did it in like the 4th century. I recommend you read that book because Mike Lewis is basically trying to counter-argue and counter-signal St. Vincent of Lerins. And I became aware of St. Vincent of Lerins really for this because Pope Francis kept quoting him as if he was endorsing what he was doing to the church, when in reality, St. Vincent of Lerins was standing against men like Francis. When we go back to the idea of getting your good name back, the 3 seminary professors, Martins, Echeverria, and Edwards, cannot get their good names back. What are the chances they get jobs at a seminary? Probably non-existent. The FSSP seminaries won't hire them because the FSSP are always getting an apostolic visitation every year. Every year they get one to make sure they're on the team. I doubt the SSPX would because these seminary professors are pretty conservative, but again, as I was reminded by people after my initial report, they weren't traditionalists either. They were on the team when it came to Vatican II, and it wasn't good enough to protect them because they said bad things about Dear Leader. All right, folks, I'm very curious what you have to say about this. Let me know in the comments. Please pray for everybody we spoke about today. Mike Lewis, the Michael Shawn Winters, pray for them. Pray for everybody who made for Archbishop Weissenberger. I'm not trying to make you mad at him. He does a good enough job at that without my help. Richard Corin with the super chat. Thank you for being a member. 26 months, sir. It is appreciated. Pray you are well as a family. Could you please give the title of the book again? Yes, that would be The Commentary. Put it in the chat because it's got a weird spelling. By St. Vincent of Lerins. You can find it on Amazon. It's not big. It's like that thick. It's a very easy read. A person could probably read it in an afternoon if they really wanted to. But I do recommend you read a little bit and then think about what you were reading. I don't care if you watch my recording of it or not. Don't tell you about that for the clicks. Just go buy a copy of it if you need, if it's better for you. It's one of the most important things you will read because I have not seen a rebuttal of it. All right, folks, thanks very much for tuning in today. I'm a little worked up about this because everybody we spoke about today, good luck getting their good names back after a smear campaign. Thanks very much for tuning in today. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.